Emma's fingers danced across her keyboard, the rapid clicks mixing with the ambient hum of the office. It was nearly 8 in the evening, and most of her colleagues had already left for the day. The open-plan office was eerily quiet except for the distant sound of the janitor's vacuum cleaner. She glanced at her watch and sighed. Another late night at Reynolds' marketing agency. At 26, Emma had been with the company for 3 years. Despite her dedication and consistently strong performance, she remained stuck as a marketing assistant while watching less qualified coworkers climb the corporate ladder. She saved her document and leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. "Still here, Emma?" The deep voice startled her. She turned to see James Miller, her boss, standing a few feet away. At 30, James had become the youngest marketing director in the company's history. Tall with broad shoulders, he had warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Tonight his blue tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Just finishing the Carter proposal," Emma replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "I had some new ideas I wanted to include before tomorrow's meeting." James nodded, impressed. "That's what I like about you, always going the extra mile." He pulled up a chair beside her desk. "Mind if I take a look?" His cologne, something woodsy and expensive, filled her senses as he leaned closer to view her computer screen. Emma was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, their shoulders almost touching. She could see the faint stubble on his jaw and the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "This is really good work," he said after reviewing her proposal. "You have a natural talent for this." "Thank you," Emma replied, warmth spreading through her chest at his praise. "I just wish others would notice." James looked at her curiously, feeling underappreciated. Emma hesitated, then decided to be honest. "A little. I've been here 3 years, and I'm still doing assistant work while people with half my experience are moving up." James nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed your work, Emma, more than you might realize." Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. "Actually, something big is coming up that might interest you." "What is it?" Emma asked, leaning forward eagerly. "The Platinum account. We just got word today that they want to revamp their entire brand image. It's huge, probably the biggest account we've handled this year." Emma's heart raced. Platinum was a luxury hotel chain known worldwide. A successful campaign for them would be career-changing. "I'm putting together a small team," James continued. "It'll mean long hours, but also high visibility with the executive board." He held her gaze. "Are you interested?" "Absolutely," Emma replied without hesitation. "I'd love to be part of it." James smiled, and Emma noticed how it transformed his usually serious face. "Good. I need someone with fresh ideas, someone who isn't afraid to take risks." He stood up, and Emma rose too, suddenly aware of how much taller he was. In her heels, the top of her head barely reached his shoulder. "We'll start tomorrow. For now, go home and get some rest," James said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. The contact, though professional, sent a jolt through her body. As Emma gathered her things, she caught James watching her. There was something in his gaze she hadn't noticed before, appreciation that seemed to go beyond her work. On her drive home, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the opportunity. The Platinum account could be her chance to finally move up, and working closely with James, she pushed that thought away. He was her boss. Attractive, yes. Intelligent, definitely. But completely off limits. Yet as she fell asleep that night, it wasn't the Platinum account that filled her dreams, but brown eyes and a rare smile that made her heart race. Emma knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but for the first time in months, she felt alive with possibility, both professionally and personally. The path to promotion suddenly seemed clear, though complicated by feelings she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The Platinum project took over Emma's life in the following weeks. Days blurred into nights as the small team worked tirelessly to develop the perfect rebranding strategy. Emma found herself spending more time with James than she had ever imagined possible. Their late-night brainstorming sessions often stretched until midnight, just the two of them surrounded by empty coffee cups and whiteboards filled with ideas. One evening, as they worked in the conference room, Emma caught James staring at her instead of the presentation slides. "Is something wrong?" she asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear self-consciously. James shook his head, looking slightly embarrassed at being caught. "No, just thinking how lucky I am to have you on this project. Your ideas are refreshing." Emma felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thanks. I'm just glad to finally have a chance to prove myself." As James gathered his notes, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away immediately, and Emma felt her pulse quicken at the brief contact. The air between them seemed to thicken. "We should probably call it a night," James said, his voice slightly deeper than usual. On her way home, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. It both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Emma arrived early to find a coffee cup on her desk with a sticky note, "Fuel for our champion idea generator." Jay, she smiled, holding the cup with both hands as if it were something precious. Later that week, they hit a creative wall on the project. The team was gathered in the conference room, but nothing seemed to click. "Let's take a break," James announced after 2 hours of unproductive discussion. As everyone filed out, he caught Emma's eye. "Can you stay behind for a minute?" When they were alone, James loosened his tie and sighed. "I'm worried we're heading in the wrong direction." Emma nodded, feeling bold. "I think so too. It's too safe. Platinum needs something bolder." "Exactly." James moved closer, animated by her understanding. "Show me what you're thinking." Emma pulled out her private sketchbook, which contained ideas she'd been too nervous to share with the group. As she explained her concept, James moved to stand behind her, looking over her shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her neck. "This is brilliant," he murmured, his voice close to her ear. When she turned to respond, their faces were inches apart. Emma's words died in her throat as their eyes locked. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he straightened and cleared his throat. "We should develop this further. Are you free tonight?" They'd agreed to meet at a small bistro away from the office to continue their discussion. The setting was intimate, dim lighting, quiet music, a table in the corner. As they talked about the project, their conversation gradually drifted to personal topics. "Why haven't you pushed harder for promotion before now?" James asked, swirling the wine in his glass. Emma considered her answer. "I guess I was waiting to be noticed, hoping my work would speak for itself." "It does," James said quietly. "I've been watching you for a while." The intensity in his eyes made her stomach flip. "As my boss, you mean?" "Not just as your boss." The admission hung between them. As they left the restaurant, a light rain had started. James offered to drive her home since she had taken the subway. In his car, the confined space made every movement, every glance, more significant. Outside her apartment building, he turned to her. "This was nice. Different seeing you outside the office." "Good different or bad different?" Emma asked, heart pounding. "Definitely good," he replied, his eyes dropping briefly to her lips. The tension between them was palpable. Emma knew she should get out of the car, maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly forward. James reached over, his fingers gently touching her cheek. "Emma, you know we shouldn't." "I know," she whispered, but neither moved away. The rain drummed harder on the roof of the car, creating a private world for just the two of them. When his phone suddenly rang, they both jumped, the spell broken. "It's the client," he said, checking the screen with obvious reluctance. Emma nodded, gathering her things. "I'll see you tomorrow." As she walked into her building, Emma could feel his eyes following her. The Platinum Project was changing everything, her career prospects certainly, but more dangerously, her feelings for the one person who was completely off-limits. Yet as she fell asleep that night, she couldn't bring herself to regret the line they were inching closer to crossing. The Platinum Project entered its critical phase, with a major client presentation looming just 2 weeks away. One Monday morning, James called Emma into his office, closing the door behind her. "I just got off the phone with the client," he said, leaning against his desk. "They want an in-person update this weekend at their annual leadership retreat in Denver." Emma's heart skipped. "This weekend? I know it's last minute. But this is our chance to make sure we're aligned before the final presentation." He paused, watching her carefully. "I'd like you to come with me." "Me?" Emma asked, surprised. "You know this campaign better than anyone. Plus, I think it's time the executives see whose ideas are driving this project." Their eyes met, and Emma wondered if there were other reasons he wanted her along. Of course I'll come, she said, trying to sound professional despite her racing pulse. The flight to Denver was uneventful, though Emma was acutely aware of James beside her. They reviewed their presentation, shoulders touching in the cramped airplane seats. When James fell asleep briefly, his head drifted onto her shoulder. Emma sat perfectly still, savoring the warmth of him against her. The problem arose when they reached the mountain resort. A flustered receptionist looked up from her computer with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. Due to the retreat, we're overbooked. We have your reservation, but instead of 2 rooms, we only have 1 suite available." Emma felt her cheeks flush as James turned to her. "We can try another hotel," he offered. "Everything nearby is booked for the retreat," the receptionist added helpfully. "The suite does have a separate bedroom and a pull-out sofa in the living area." James raised an eyebrow at Emma, leaving the decision to her. "It's fine," Emma said, surprising herself. "We're here for work. We can make it work." The suite was beautiful, with panoramic views of the mountains. Emma insisted James take the bedroom while she would use the sofa bed. After settling in, they headed to a welcome dinner with the Platinum executives. Emma impressed them with her knowledge of their brand and creative vision. She could feel James watching her with pride as she fielded questions confidently. As they walked back to their suite through the chilly mountain air, James put his jacket around her shoulders. "You were amazing tonight," he said. "They loved you." Back in the suite, they opened a bottle of wine to celebrate the successful dinner. Sitting on the sofa, they went from discussing work to sharing stories about their lives. Emma learned that James had started in the mailroom of an ad agency after dropping out of college, working his way up through sheer determination. "That's why I noticed you," he admitted, refilling their glasses. "You remind me of myself. That hunger to prove yourself." "Is that the only reason you noticed me?" Emma asked boldly, the wine making her brave. James looked at her intently. "No," he said quietly. "Not the only reason." The air between them crackled with tension. Emma was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, how alone they were in this beautiful mountain retreat. "Emma," James said, his voice husky. "I've been fighting this for weeks now." "Fighting what?" she whispered, though she knew. Instead of answering, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Emma's breath caught as he leaned closer. The shrill ring of his phone shattered the moment. James closed his eyes briefly in frustration before answering. "It's the creative team back at the office," he explained after hanging up. "There's an issue with the mock-ups we need for tomorrow." The spell broken, Emma stood up. "We should get some rest anyway. Big day tomorrow." As she prepared the sofa bed, James paused at his bedroom door. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "I wish that phone hadn't rung." Emma lay awake long after he closed his door, replaying the almost kiss in her mind. Tomorrow they would face the clients together, maintain their professional facade. But something had shifted between them, a line nearly crossed. In the darkness of the suite, with only a door between them, Emma wondered what would happen when they returned to the city. The promotion she wanted was almost within reach, but now she wasn't sure if it was still her primary desire. The Denver trip changed everything. In the following days back at the office, Emma could feel James watching her across meeting rooms. Their fingers would brush when passing documents, lingering a second too long. Every accidental touch, every shared glance held new meaning. They were professionals during the day, but the air between them was charged with unspoken desire. The Platinum campaign was coming together brilliantly. Late one evening, a week after their trip, Emma was alone in the office finalizing the presentation. She didn't hear James approach until he spoke. "Still here? It's almost 10. Emma looked up, startled. "Just perfecting a few slides. I want everything to be perfect for Friday." James leaned against her desk, loosening his tie. "You're remarkable, you know that? Most people would have gone home hours ago." "Is that a bad thing?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "It's one of the things I admire about you." Emma saved her work and stood up, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the darkened office. The night cleaning crew had already finished their rounds. "Walk me through what you've changed," James said, moving to stand beside her at the computer. As Emma explained her adjustments, she could feel the heat of his body near hers. When she turned to gauge his reaction, their faces were inches apart. "James," she whispered, her heart hammering in her chest. This is a bad idea, he murmured, eyes dropping to her lips. Probably the worst, she agreed, not moving away. The tension that had been building for weeks finally snapped. James cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing hunger as Emma responded eagerly. Her hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer as years of professional restraint melted away. I've wanted to do that since your first day, he confessed against her lips. Emma backed up until she felt the edge of her desk behind her. James lifted her onto it, standing between her legs as they continued to kiss. His hands slid from her waist to her thighs, pushing her pencil skirt higher. We shouldn't do this here. Emma gasped as his lips found her neck. You're right, James said, pulling back slightly. His hair was mussed where her fingers had run through it, his eyes dark with desire. But I don't think I can wait any longer. Emma made her decision. She reached for his tie, loosening it completely before starting on his shirt buttons. Then don't. What followed was a frenzied release of weeks of pent-up attraction. Office supplies scattered to the floor as James cleared a space on her desk. Emma's blouse came undone under his eager fingers. His mouth traced a burning path from her neck to her collarbone, then lower. Emma had imagined this moment, but reality far exceeded fantasy. James was both passionate and attentive, whispering questions and praise against her skin. When they finally came together, Emma had to bite her lip to keep from crying out in the empty office. Afterward, they looked at each other with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief at what they'd done. That was. James trailed off, helping Emma rearrange her clothing. Unprofessional? Emma suggested with a small smile. Incredible, he corrected, kissing her softly. But yes, definitely unprofessional. They straightened the office, erasing evidence of their encounter. As James helped Emma into her coat, reality began to intrude. What happens now? She asked quietly. James ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't know. This complicates things. The promotion, Emma said, voicing what they were both thinking. You've earned it, Emma. This doesn't change that. He touched her cheek gently. But people will talk if they find out. Emma nodded, understanding the implications. Office relationships were discouraged but not forbidden. However, relationships between managers and their direct reports were strictly against company policy. We should be careful, she said. James nodded, though his eyes still held heat when they looked at her. Tomorrow we'll be professionals again, but tonight he pulled her close for one more kiss. As Emma drove home in the dark, her body still humming from his touch, she knew they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The promotion that had once been her singular focus was now tangled with complicated feelings for James. Tomorrow would bring awkwardness and necessary pretense, but tonight Emma allowed herself to replay every moment of their encounter, a secret smile on her lips as she remembered the feel of his hands, his mouth, his whispered words of desire. The day of the promotion decision arrived with tension hanging in the air. Emma entered the office early, her stomach in knots. As she arranged her presentation materials for the meeting, she couldn't help replaying her conversation with James from the previous night. Whatever happens tomorrow, he had said, holding her close in his bed, it doesn't change what's between us. But Emma wasn't so sure. If she got the promotion, people would talk. If Tom got it, she'd have to work alongside him, knowing what might have been. The executive conference room filled gradually. Emma spotted James at the far end, speaking with the CEO. He gave her a brief professional nod, but his eyes held warmth only she would recognize. Tom arrived last, looking confident in a new suit. Good morning, everyone, the CEO began once they were all seated. As you know, we're here to determine who will fill our senior marketing manager position. Both candidates will present their vision for the department, focusing particularly on how they would build on the success of the Platinum campaign. Tom went first. His presentation was polished and technically sound, but safe. Emma watched the executives' faces, noting their attentive but measured reactions. When her turn came, Emma took a deep breath and stood. As she moved to the front of the room, she caught James watching her intently. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was he looking at her as his lover or as a candidate? She pushed the thought away and began. The Platinum campaign showed us something essential about our approach, she started. Success comes from taking calculated risks. Her presentation flowed naturally, building on lessons from the campaign but pushing further with bold, innovative strategies. As she spoke, Emma felt a familiar confidence return, the same drive that had pushed her to stay late, to go beyond what was expected, long before James had been anything more than her boss. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before the CEO began to applaud. Impressive, Emma, very impressive. The board asked questions of both candidates, then asked them to wait outside while they deliberated. In the hallway, Tom gave her a competitive but respectful nod. Good luck, he said simply. 20 minutes later, they were called back in. Emma's heart pounded as the CEO stood up. Both candidates demonstrated exceptional qualities, he began. This was not an easy decision. Emma held her breath. However, based on the innovative approach and proven results on the Platinum campaign, we've decided to offer the position to Emma. The room erupted in applause. Emma accepted congratulations, careful to maintain her composure, while joy and relief washed through her. As people began filing out, the CEO pulled her aside. James advocated strongly for you, he said quietly. Not during the final decision process. He properly recused himself there. But months ago, he submitted your name for consideration before the Platinum project even began. Emma blinked in surprise. He did. Said you were the most promising talent he'd seen in years. The CEO smiled. Just thought you should know. This revelation stunned Emma. James had believed in her before anything had happened between them. As the room emptied, James approached her last, extending his hand formally. Congratulations, Emma, well deserved. Thank you, Mr. Miller, she replied, matching his professional tone while her mind raced with questions. That evening, Emma found herself alone in her new office. A real office with a door, not a desk in the open plan area. She was arranging her things when James knocked on the doorframe. May I come in? He asked. Emma nodded, closing the door behind him. The moment it clicked shut, James's professional demeanor melted. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice warm. You were brilliant today. The CEO told me something interesting, Emma said, studying his face. He said you recommended me for promotion months ago. Before Denver. Before us. James looked slightly embarrassed. I did. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want you to think what happened between us had anything to do with your career. It was always about how talented you are. Emma moved closer to him, so our first night together in the office had nothing to do with promotion and everything to do with not being able to resist you anymore, he finished, his eyes darkening at the memory. Relief and desire mingled as Emma processed this truth. Their relationship hadn't been about career advancement, it had simply been about them, two people unable to deny their attraction despite the complications. James gently touched her face. So, Senior Manager Wilson, what happens now? Now that I'm not your direct report anymore, Emma said slowly, we should probably discuss disclosing our relationship to HR. Is that what you want? He asked, searching her eyes. Emma's first month as Senior Marketing Manager passed in a whirlwind of new responsibilities, challenges, and adjustments. Her relationship with James evolved too, shifting from forbidden excitement to something more open yet equally intense. After careful consideration, they had submitted the required relationship disclosure forms to HR, bracing themselves for the inevitable office gossip. Lisa from Human Resources had raised an eyebrow during their meeting, but ultimately confirmed there was no policy violation since Emma no longer reported directly to James. Just keep things professional during work hours, she had cautioned, looking between them skeptically. The whispers in the break room and knowing glances in meetings didn't bother Emma as much as she'd expected. Her work spoke for itself. The Platinum campaign had launched to tremendous success, earning industry recognition and bringing in 3 new luxury clients. When colleagues realized Emma's promotion was backed by tangible results, the murmurs gradually faded. One evening, Emma was working late in her office when James appeared at her door, coat in hand. Still here at 9? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Some things never change. Emma smiled, saving her document. Just finishing the quarterly strategy. Did you need something? James closed the door and approached her desk with a serious expression. Actually, yes. I've been thinking about us. Emma's stomach tightened. Despite their relationship becoming official, a part of her still feared it might not last once the thrill of secrecy was gone. What about us? She asked cautiously. I've been offered a position at Mitchell and Brooks, he said quietly. The rival agency. Emma felt her heart sink. You're leaving? James nodded. I think I should. The executive team is supportive of our relationship, but I've noticed how it affects you. The way some people still question whether you earned your position. I don't care what they think, Emma protested, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. I do, James said firmly. I care about your career, your reputation. As long as we're at the same company, there will always be people who undervalue your achievements. Emma stood and moved around her desk to face him. So you're just going to decide this without discussing it with me? I'm discussing it now, he said, taking her hands. This isn't just about work, Emma. It's about us having a real chance. Emma studied his face, realizing how serious he was. You'd leave your director position for us? For us, he confirmed, and for you to fully step into the spotlight you deserve without my shadow over you. Emma felt tears threatening. What had begun as an impulsive, physically charged affair had somehow grown into this, a man willing to change his career path to protect her reputation and future. When would you start? She asked softly. They want me next month, and there's something else. James looked nervous suddenly. They're opening a London office next year. They've asked me to head it up. London. Emma repeated, her mind racing. It's an amazing opportunity, James continued. But I won't take it if. If what? Emma prompted when he hesitated. James took a deep breath. If you don't want to try making this work long distance, or if you might consider coming with me, he finished, watching her reaction carefully. Not right away. Give yourself a year here in your new role. Build your reputation. Then maybe. Emma's breath caught. Are you asking me to move to London with you? That's a big step, James. I know. He stroked her cheek gently. Too big, too soon. Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From ambitious assistant to the promotion she'd earned through her talent and determination, from inappropriate attraction to something deeper neither had anticipated. A year ago, I was focused on one thing, moving up in this company, she said slowly. I never expected you. I never expected us. Do you regret it? James asked quietly. Emma shook her head. No. But I need to know, is this real? Or was it the thrill of breaking rules that made it exciting? James pulled her closer. When I'm in London and you're still here succeeding brilliantly, I'll call you every night. I'll fly back whenever I can, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there will be a place for you there. That's how real this is to me. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her forehead to his. The path forward wasn't simple, but nothing about their relationship had ever been simple. I think, she said slowly, that I'd like to see London someday. James smiled, relief evident in his eyes. So we try? We try, Emma agreed. As they left the office together that night, no longer hiding their connection, Emma realized how much had changed. She had secured her promotion, but found something equally valuable along the way. What had begun as ambition mixed with attraction had evolved into a future neither had planned for, but both now wanted desperately. James took her hand as they walked to the elevator, no longer concerned who might see. Emma squeezed his fingers, appreciating the simplicity of the gesture after months of secret touches and hidden glances. Whatever challenges lay ahead, distance, career decisions, uncertain futures, at least they would face them honestly together.